joined today by a very special guest, somebody who I idolized immensely in my teenage years, one of the greatest running backs of my lifetime or anybody's, frankly, cannabis advocist as well, Ricky Williams. Ricky, thanks so much for joining the show. This is so cool. I really appreciate it.
No, thanks for having me.
So you are now selling your own line of hemp products. When did you get this started? And walk me through the name Heisman, because it is just so perfect.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things I can say about the name. I mean, people hear the name and they laugh and they get the obvious play on words. But honestly, though, my senior year in college when I won the Heisman was really my first real introduction to cannabis. And not introduction, because I grew up and my dad was a Rasta and I grew up in San Diego, so I was around it all the time. But as a jock, as an athlete, it wasn't something that I really gravitated towards. In college, some of the guys, on Friday nights when they're in the dorm shooting dice, they would pass a blunt around. But that was just trying to fit in with the guys. But my senior year in college, came back for my senior year to try to win the Heisman Trophy, and I got off to a really rough start. We played Kansas State, and they held me to like 43 yards, and I got a bad quad strain. And the week before, I found out that my girlfriend and the quarterback were in a relationship. So I was just having a really rough week, and my roommate was kind of joking with me, and he's like, "You need to like smoke something," And he was a smoker, so he slid his bong over to me, and I took a couple of hits. And I remember going upstairs and laying on the bed, and like it was the first like moment of clarity and peace where I wasn't obsessing about the bad game or the girlfriend. And in that clarity, I started to see myself playing better,
Yeah.
And next week I ran for, I think, 315 yards. The following week I ran for 350 yards. And the rest, as they say, is history. So it was a point where I saw the value in my life at that time of cannabis. And I don't think I would have won the Heisman Trophy if it wasn't for that clarity and that shift in my mind that cannabis helped me create.
So, I mean, it sounds like that's such an interesting origin story if we're going to talk about this like your Ricky Williams, the superhero. But you said you grew up around it, but then that bong experience was really the first time that it sounds like that you actually got high. Is that the case? Am I understanding that correctly? Or is that just the first time you used it for a stress relief?
Yeah, it was the first time I used it for stress relief, because the other times it wasn't ever introduced to me in the context that it could be good for that. It was only introduced that the upperclassmen are doing it and I want to kind of fit in and be cool, right? But I will say, again, my dad was a Rasta, and so I grew up around reggae music and Bob Marley, and so the idea that there was something positive was in there, but also the DARE program at school, right, was also in there, and then going to jail was also in there. And then I think when you're a young athlete that has a lot of potential, one of the things you hear over and over and over again, right, is don't mess it up over drugs.
Yeah.
So it was these competing things in my consciousness, and it wasn't until that moment of what I would call crisis that the real value of the plant really showed up. And I think, at least to me, that's to me, that's part of the story, right? It's like in all the movies, right? The moment is when the hero is in crisis and they realize some power inside of them to overcome it, and then the story becomes good after that.
I could bring you on here and talk football with you for 20 minutes, which is probably what most people that are listening to this sports show would expect. But I just think your story is so fascinating, and I think that not enough people that I've listened to, as far as interviews that you've done, have just simply talked about marijuana, their experiences with it, and how it can actually benefit people. So that's the way that I would like to tailor this conversation. One of the things that for me, when I first tried it, I was maybe a senior in high school, completely bugged out. And then I got into college, started using it a little bit more, and it became something that it brought me a lot of peace. And I understood the positives. And honestly, it made me judge you a lot less, because as a 16-year-old watching you leave my Miami Dolphins, there was resentment. I agree with that, but I'm sure you've heard that one a lot, right?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I get it. I totally get it.
So I guess where I'm getting at with that is, I experienced that, and my first experience was not a positive one. Tried it again, and then started using it more in college. As I got older and became a professional, I just sort of got away from it. My friends weren't doing it anymore. Now I have a family. And whenever I've dipped my toe back in, I feel like the kid who tried it for the first time, and not the college kid who felt so laid back and at ease. Do you hear that often? Has it changed, I guess, is the way that I want to frame this, because it seems like since weed has been legalized around the country, in my experience, it feels different than it was before.
Okay, so there's a couple ways to approach this. One, over time, especially when something becomes legal, people have more freedom to experiment, and through experimentation, right? Some people figure some things out, and you get improvement. So we can say, pretty much across the board, as people have learned to do a better job growing cannabis, and especially the market wants higher THC, and so people are growing cannabis to increase the psychoactive effect of the plant. So there's some truth in that the cannabis now is more potent. Okay, but I don't think that's really the most important part of it. To me, with psychedelics or mind-altering substances or mind-altering anything, the most important thing that research has shown is set and setting. And part of set and setting is our mental attitude about something, and something changes drastically when something goes from being illegal to being legal. And now that it's becoming more normalized, that's shifting something too. And also all of the stigma, right? I think to me, that's the thing that makes cannabis the most dangerous, is people's negative attitudes about it. And so, my mission is really to get people not to be cannabis enthusiasts, but at least to get away from the negative attitude and approach it more of I understand what this is. And from that perspective, I can say yes, or I can say no. It's not about good or bad or right or wrong. And then I think only then can people really get the most out of what the possibilities with this plant.
And it also seems like as it has become legalized, and as stores and shops like Heisman.com that have popped up, there's more types and styles. Like, all I knew in the past was a bag. That was it. Are there? Have you noticed that there are different strands, different styles for different people, that one might not jive with somebody, and it actually has sort of negative reaction for them?
Yes, 100%. So cannabis is an herb, and one of the things that I did in my free time was I became curious about herbs, because growing up, we just took pills. and so when I got in trouble for this herb that I was using to treat myself, I became curious there's a whole area of study about people using herbs to treat themselves. So I started to study it. And the first thing in herbalism is you have to understand who the person is, right? And then once you understand who the person is, you have a sense of which herbs might be useful to keep this person into balance. And cannabis is one herb, but it's an amazing herb because it can produce so many different smells, flavors, effects. It's like a cool. And from a herbalist or a medicinal perspective, it's really exciting because you can use one herb, right, to treat a lot of different things. And so in Heisman, the way that we've tried to simplify this idea is the way we market our products, at least the flower side of things, is pregame, halftime, and postgame. Right?
I love that.
Yeah, because it's not too complex, but it's simple. It's simple enough. And so what is commonly known as sativas, but that's a whole nother philosophical conversation. But the idea is that they're more mental. If you smoke a sativa, it's not going to be typically a body kind of feel where you feel relaxed. It's more of like active mind, creative, and if you're someone that's already kind of anxious and the mind works like that, it might send you into overdrive, but if a person like that takes too heavy of an indica or something that's more getting you into your body, getting you more grounded, right? They might fall asleep and be mad that they missed 3 hours that they could have been creative.
Right.
So for them, maybe halftime, right? Something that, right, takes the edge off a little bit, right? Allows them to be more grounded in their creativity and they can be more productive, right? But someone who's dealing with a lot of physical pain, or right, an indica, right? Because it's interesting. When I played football, they would give us anti-inflammatories and they would give us opioids, right? And that both of those tend to hide the pain from us, But one of the things about cannabis, it's not that it makes it more intense, but it puts you more in touch with your body, and you can be more present and you can breathe through it and you can relax into it. It actually leads to a more healing response. So definitely, and I think the advantage of all of the advancements because of the legalization of cannabis is that someone who has the time and the education and the ability can really find a product that works for exactly what they'd like to use it for.
And that's the ironic part, is that for a substance that's supposed to help with anxiety, it can actually spike people's anxiety. My wife was dealing with anxiety a couple of years back, and I had suggested, again, I'm not a regular user anymore, but I said, look, in my past, this helped me with anxiety, and it didn't help at all. So, and I think that maybe it's what you're talking about. It's the general education of what exactly are you getting into, and are you seeing enough of that? Obviously, you're doing it, but with others around the country that are selling marijuana, is there enough education in the product, or is it just, hey, this is legal, let's sell it?
It's tricky, if I'm sitting around a bunch of industry people, right, and we're talking amongst each other, the thing that we're talking about is education. But when these companies have to have to make money, then they're realizing that the path to making money through education, right, it takes a little bit longer. But the path to
There's no money in education.
exactly, and not in the short term. So it's a tricky place right now in the industry because of the lack of federal regulation. There's not a lot of money coming in, and so people are just having to make money by flipping product. And so until that shifts, it's going to be tough. But like you said, I'm out there doing my thing, and I'm really pushing to get more athletes to educate themselves and to share their stories. Because to me, when I think of, I think beyond normalization, I think of, if we're going to spend our time and our energy promoting something, it should be adding to the quality of people's lives. And I think people like athletes, people that are highly successful that also consume cannabis, is they have valuable information to help people know how to make the most of this plant.
How have you seen this help athletes that you have either been on a team with over the course of the years? Obviously, it's helped you tremendously, but outside of yourself, there's the people that have been around you. How have you seen marijuana dig them out of whatever struggles they're going through?
Yeah, so because a lot of current players don't really talk about, have these conversations, most of the time I hear these conversations are from retired players. And the thing I hear over and over and over and over again, right? And I don't care, but it's funny. But I hear this over and over again is, Ricky, you were right. And they tell a story about, kind of similar story you told, when it happened, I was like, how dumb is this guy? He said, but then I retired and I started doing it, and I wish I would have listened earlier. That's what they all say, all of them, and they talk about that they feel good, that they feel good. And then they also bring up, they compare to going back in their past and, how they used alcohol and how, it might have gotten them in trouble in certain situations. And that's also another part of the conversation with athletes, is I wish I would have been doing this instead of drinking.
You go back to that time in your prime with the Dolphins. You walked away from the game. I was a naive 16-year-old, so don't take my opinion for anything. But did you feel a sense of guilt when you walked away, or did you just need that so bad that didn't even creep in yet?
I needed it so bad. It wasn't like it didn't creep in. I didn't feel guilt because I felt the way that I felt is I put
Ricky, I
my
had a plaque on my wall. I had to take it down.
Here, let me
Destroyed
explain
me.
why. Let me explain why. Because for me, the way I felt is I put everything I was, like my body, everything on the line, and it wasn't even about the fans, but it was relative. When I looked at my whole life beyond just being a football player, I started to do the math, and I said, at some point, I have to take care of myself. or I'm not gonna make it, And when that hit me, I was like, okay, like in order for me to take care of myself, I at least got to step away from this torture chamber called football, at least to get my mind clear to even figure out what does that even mean to take care of myself. And so, yes, I took a year off and I found some answers and I was able to come back and give the Dolphins some good years. When we got to the playoffs, we did some good stuff. We got the Wildcat. So at the end of the day, I feel good.
Well, we're good. Just so you know, I forgave you a while. Not that you cared, but I forgave you a long time ago. That Wildcat year when you came back and the offense changed and Ronnie Brown was running the Wildcat and you had an incredible season. Is that the most because you had already gone through that experience, that transformation, and taken ownership of your own life? Was that the most fun that you ever had playing football?
Oh, no doubt. And it really was about our running back room. People sometimes don't realize that, yes, we're a football team, but we spend the majority of our time, because we'll meet in the morning as a team for like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and then we'll divide into offense and defense for a couple of hours. And then we spend the rest of the day with just the running backs. And Ronnie Brown, who I played with, one of my best friends in the whole world. And so it was just fun to play with Ronnie. And at first it was like he would get too serious and I would get too serious and we'd go back and forth. But when the Wildcat came, we were both on the field at the same time. And our fullback, Lusaka Polite, was on the field. And our other running back, Pete Cobbs, was also on the field. So pretty much our whole running back room was on the field for a lot of the season. So it was, by far one of the most fun years I had played football.
The NCAA just passed the ruling that marijuana would no longer be a banned substance. How is that going to benefit college athletes who probably don't need it for medicinal purposes just yet in their lives? I would imagine, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that most college athletes that are using marijuana were using it the way that I was using it when I was in college, which is it's fun. And maybe there is a little bit of mental relief that comes with it, but they don't even realize that that's why they're using it yet. So is that still something that you think it's good that the NCAA is backing off? But do you think it is ultimately a benefit to college athletes?
I think it's a gesture that hopefully benefits them. But the big issue with college athletes is not the NCAA and cannabis; it's the universities. Most of because and it used to be a little bit different. I think when college football playoffs and that stuff really mattered to the players. What I mean now is you see certain players because they might get hurt for the draft that they won't play in these postseason games, and so I don't see a lot of players in college getting in a whole lot of trouble for cannabis. There are some, and I know there are two at Texas when I played who have ruined their careers. So when I heard the news, that's where it hit me personally. The two players that I played with in college that lost a year of eligibility because they failed to test for cannabis. That still to this day, 25 years later, it still breaks my heart. So when I saw this change, that's what I thought about. But as an advocate, yes, I think it definitely will help college players. I think you're right, but it's just a matter of education because being a college athlete is extremely stressful. Extremely stressful. And I think anyone who's experiencing a whole lot of stress, in order to stay healthy, they have to find something to do with that stress.
But do you think that is there an age that, like, let's say you were cannabis president of the United States, what age would you allow people to start smoking weed?
Without a prescription, I'd say 18. But I say without a prescription because if we're getting outside of the rules, and we need rules, but if we're getting to like real human life, right, real human affairs, real stuff, is that what I'm saying is it's funny. When I was studying herbalism, I was studying something called Ayurveda, which is ancient medicine from India, and I was looking through one of the textbooks, and it like jumped out. There was a whole chapter on cannabis, and I was like, why do they have a whole chapter on this plant if it's bad? And as I started looking through the chapter, it's funny, the first thing they said, and in their culture, they had rules. And they said the only people that are allowed to use cannabis are the Brahmins, the priests, and people that do hard physical labor. It's like the first thing, right? Because for them, they appreciated what it was good for, which made it easy for them to say, who is this good for? Something about doing religious, spiritual stuff, and something about hard labor. Right? We could call it creativity and pain management. Okay. We could call it sativa and indica. Right? We could call it a whole bunch of other stuff. So if someone is doing hard physical labor, right? Stress, okay, something about cannabis helps the body come back to homeostasis, right? Because what we found with the endocannabinoid system is that it works with the body's homeostasis, and homeostasis is nature's way to counteract being in the fight or flight response. And are college athletes in the fight or fight response often? Yes. Could they have some facilitation in coming back to homeostasis so that they can recover and do it again the next day? Yes, 100%. And also, going back to the question of age, some kids go through really traumatic stuff and are dealing with more stress than other kids. That's why I say without a prescription, 18, right? But I think there are special cases where kids could benefit at a younger age.
You can check out his products. It's Heisman.com. That's Highsman. Though if you made it to this point in the podcast, probably figured out that spelling by now. Spark greatness is the slogan. Love that one too. Can everybody, no matter where you are, can you order this, or is this state specific?
So our THC products are state specific, and we're in 9 states right now. But our hemp products, I think, are like 48 states. I think there's some states that have funky rules around hemp products, but our hemp products are most people can get access to. Yes.
Ricky Williams won a Heisman Trophy at Texas, rushed for over 10,000 yards in the NFL, and he is now living out his calling, spreading the good word about cannabis. Thanks so much, Ricky. I really appreciate it. And again, we're good.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.